All of that covers how to think about a piece of writing in a critical way. Once you've considered all of those things, you need to actually write about this stuff and put it in the form of an argumentative essay. So let's take a look at how you might frame that sort of argument. So there are generally 4 points you could make about a work when writing a critical analysis essay. First, you could focus on the overt or stated purpose and how effective or successful something is. This is your traditional evaluative thesis. The next 2 kinds of arguments are factual. In these kinds of arguments, if you threw the word "in fact" in front of a statement, it would make sense. For instance, you could argue that the common surface reading of something was inaccurate, or in our current historical context, we fail to understand the actual meaning or the actual intended meaning of something. This is really common today, as we now have literally thousands of years of texts that we continue to evaluate. And sometimes when we look at them from a modern perspective, we fail to understand what they actually meant at the time. So an example of a statement might sound something like this. Although it's commonly received in this way, in fact, the author actually intended this. Alternatively, you could argue that the author had some kind of covert intentions. This sort of argument is more aligned with an analysis of, say, a government policy or a work that is meant to have some kind of real-world result, meaning that they had this underhanded thing that they wanted to do in addition to their overt intentions. And lastly, you could take this a step further and say that the work ultimately created some kind of real-world consequence, whether intentionally, perhaps as a hidden motivation, or unintentionally, an unintended consequence. And you could do a whole variety of mashups of all of these general arguments as well. A causal and evaluative thesis, an evaluative and factual thesis, combining different aspects of the different points that you might be making into a greater and more complex argument. So once you've kind of figured out what you want to say with a particular argument, what did the author intend? What were the consequences? Were they successful? On all of those different ideas, and you're going through and you're starting to formulate your argument and pull together examples from the text and evidence for the points you're making, you're always going to want to consider both sides. This is both the writer's side as well as the audience's side. So regarding the writer, what did they intend to do? What do they hope we see or take away from their work? And what real-world result do they intend from their work? Additionally, for the audience, you want to consider how they perceive or understand a work. What do they make of it? And what real-world result this work had on its audience or continues to have on its audience. So in addition to considering both of these separately, you want to consider the differences between the two. For instance, did the author's intentions get lost on the audience when they actually went to perceive it? And things like that. Compare and contrast how the author meant it to be perceived to how it was actually received by the audience. So this whole time we've been talking about how to critically analyze writing, which is what you traditionally do in an English class. But let's keep in mind a very important point. Everything that is created, that means that somebody created it, somebody made it. Everything that's created has a point or a purpose. And that point is, in a way, some kind of argument. So we're not just critically analyzing argumentative writing, we can critically analyze anything. So consider what all went into making a thing. How effective was it at achieving its goal? And what was the result or consequences, either intended or unintended? Ultimately, you can critically analyze anything, from an article to a work of art, to a government policy, to a poster, to a label, to even something like a grocery store. And I'll leave you with that thought. So as we close out this video, I want to remind you that it really was just meant as an introduction and overview. It's impossible to teach everything about critical analysis and how to do it in a quarter of an hour, but hopefully now you have a little bit of an idea about what goes into the whole process. Till next time.